Quiet, numbskulls. I'm broadcasting.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to So There I Was. This is Fig.
And repeat.
And the title of this, episode 8, is Big Beaver Up and Ready.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Yeah. Spaz joins us for this one. Spaz flew with us in 223. He flew in 331. And he was in Norway with 331. The air tasking order was being set up, and they couldn't use their call sign because it conflicted with the Norwegian AWACS. And so they had to come up with a new call sign and find out how the rest goes from there. So
it's a great story.
It was.
Spaz has several great stories to share.
He does. He does. Guy's fun. And he relays why he was called Spaz. It was genetic. He was a less than patient man back in the day.
Yes. Great stories from Spaz. We're going to have Spaz on again because we couldn't fit all his stories in an hour. No. So like most of our guests, we're going to have him back multiple times.
Absolutely. And it'll be fun. This is fun. I know about you, but I'm having a blast reconnecting with these guys and getting some of these great stories.
I am having a blast. It makes me feel 26 years old again.
Right. Absolutely. Young and bulletproof. So, and if you're an aviation professional and you have some good stories to relay, reach out to Fig or me, and we'll see about getting you on. We know there's a lot of people out there with a lot of good aviation stories, and we aim to share them all. Without further ado, sit back and listen to episode 8, Big Beaver Up and Ready.
Please enjoy. So there I was.
It's how every great aviation tale begins. Repeat here from Pensacola, Florida. Welcome, everybody. I'm here today with my co-host,
Fig, and I'm in Kansas City today.
Nice.
And I'm very excited to introduce Spaz. Hello, Spaz.
Hey, Fig. How are you guys? Good to be here.
Good to see you again, Spaz. Spaz flew with us in 223 back in the day, so good to have you with us.
Thanks.
Well, Spaz, I'd like to ask everybody, how did you get into aviation? How did you get into aviation specifically, and how did you end up in the Marine Corps flying Harriers?
That's a good question. So my father was in the Marine Corps during Korea. He was a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps. He got drafted in the Marines. He was a redheaded stepchild at a family reunion. But my dad was a banker his whole professional life. So he was in the Marine Corps by force and not by choice. But I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I grew up about 10, 15 minutes at the most from the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport. And so as a kid, my dad would take me and my brother down to the Fort Lauderdale Airport and watch Delta and Pan Am and Braniff and Eastern come in with their DC-9s and 727s.
You are naming some defunct airlines, brother.
Yeah, I am. And so anyway, the 2 doors down from where we lived in our neighborhood was a Delta captain, and then 2 doors down from him was a Pan Am captain. And so that's how I kind of got the bug. Plus, I went to one of those shadow programs when you're about 6th or 7th grade where you follow your dad to work for the day.
Nice.
And so I went to my dad's bank and watched what my dad did for a living. And then the highlight of the day was eating lunch at the cafeteria. So I thought if I had to do that for the rest of my life, I would blow my brains out.
Have a short life.
Yeah. So I decided that sitting behind a desk was not going to be for me. And since my dad was a Marine, I figured, so I tried to join the Marine Corps right in high school. Small oversight on my part. I forgot to tell the recruiter that my father was also a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps during Korea. And so when he came over to the house to pitch the Marine Corps, I neglected to let the staff sergeant know that my dad was also a staff sergeant in the Marines. And
how'd this go?
It's not well. So it was one of those. was one of those. I got home from baseball practice and told my mom that Staff Sergeant so-and-so was coming over tonight at 8 p.m. And she kind of said, "Are you pulling my leg?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm serious." And so my dad pulled up in the driveway after a long week at the bank. That was not what he was looking for on a Friday night. So anyways, the staff sergeant comes over, he makes his pitch. My dad listens patiently and says, "We appreciate your coming over here and making us aware, but we're pretty adamant that Jim's going to go to college first. And if he decides to join the Marine Corps after that, that's certainly his choice. But his mother and I are pretty adamant that he's going to finish college first." So the staff sergeant, he's going to lose a quota. So he starts leaning in and pressing. And so my father says, "If you could just hold that thought for 1 minute." And my dad was in 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, which is still a unit down at Camp Lejeune at Camp Swampy to this day. And so he went out and he pulled his cruise book out from Korea, and he pointed out a picture of then Staff Sergeant Snellgrove in Korea with a Browning automatic rifle over his shoulder and said, "That's me." And I know exactly what the Marine Corps can and can't do. So we appreciate your time. And with that, he made a hasty exit. And then when the door slammed shut, my dad lit me on fire.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Mostly for wasting the staff sergeant's time, but also for embarrassing my mother and he like that.
Yeah. It was a surprise.
So fast forward to college. So my mother's shot up through the ceiling and poked a hole in the roof that we had to get fixed. So fast forward to college. And when I was at my aunt and uncle's house for Thanksgiving, my senior year, I had already gone to the Louisville and done all the paperwork to join the Marine Corps with the OSO.
POC program?
Yeah, for the OCC program. And so, so then I called my mom and dad and said, "Hey, I'm here at aunt and uncle's house. I'm safe and sound." And so my mom asked me, "Have you thought about putting your resume together for interviewing in the spring? Because you're a senior now." And I said, "Oh, Mom, I don't have to worry about that. I have a job." And so needless to say, she queried what I was doing, and I told her I was going to go into the Marine Corps, and she went right back up through that same hole in the ceiling. So,
as I seem to recall, you were in the ceiling once or twice too. Hence the call sign, my brother.
Yeah, yeah.
So you inherited it, is what you're saying.
So, well, I wasn't always the calm, cool, collected pilot you see before you today. There was a time in my past where I was a little more excitable, as you can probably remember from our days together at 203 and 223.
Love it.
Yeah. So I come by it naturally, I guess. I'm caffeinated by birth.
Well played. Well,
yeah.
So you went to school. You played baseball in school too, didn't you?
I did. I pitched and played right field at Kentucky.
Nice.
See all these things. I never, if I knew Spaz, they've been deleted. The penguins went off the iceberg because I don't remember. I don't remember that. I only have this much space on the iceberg now.
Yeah, it's melting. Global warming. The iceberg is melting, and all the stuff is.
Yeah, you probably didn't know this, but when we were in Iwakuni, we were playing in a softball game, and I gunned a ball to second base where O'Hare was, and it about took his head off, and he didn't. And so he kind of viewed me differently after that because he thought I was intentionally trying to hurt him, but I was just doing what I did.
That is fantastic.
I was just doing what I did in college, and he did. I guess he didn't realize that I played ball in college, but I guess he figured it out pretty quickly.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. All right.
So you did OCC, and you got commissioned.
Yep.
Went down to Pensacola, and where'd you go through jets?
So I went through primary in Corpus, and then I went through jets in VT-27.
Yeah,
I was a new Aces, and then I went to Kingsville, Texas for VT-23 for the T2s and VT-22 for A4s.
All right, Golden Eagle.
Yeah, I was a golden wet shower. I mean, a golden eagle. That's right, Freudian slip. Yeah, better than being a gay hawk. I mean, a red hawk.
Yeah.
Oh boy, where'd you teach, Fig?
I was in VT-22 for about 6 months, and then I got moved to the wing, and I belonged to the wing forever after that, and I taught in both squadrons.
Nice.
Well, 23 was gone. It was just VT-22 and 21. It was the TA4 and the T-45.
Nice. So I played on a men's softball team down in Kingsville. A bunch of the mechanics that were working for Dynacor at the time, they were a bunch of nice guys. We had some fun. It was an opportunity to do something outside of the military.
Yeah. Which didn't happen very often, did it?
Yeah.
So you wound up selecting Harriers, getting to Cherry Point, but you
Well,
didn't join us right away. Oh,
well, I wound up being selected for Harriers.
yeah.
Oh, you was voluntold?
I was voluntold by part of the I was part of the Harrier draft where they were, I guess they decided that they needed to up the ante for the pilot. So you had to have a minimum, you had to have that minimum NSS score to go Harriers. And I guess I was an overachiever and achieved the minimum NSS score to go Harriers.
See what you get for being an overachiever?
There you
go.
Yeah.
There you go. Commodore's
no good
list
deed goes unpunished, right?
That's right. Commodore's list with distinction and top hook of my A4 boat didn't do me any favors.
Yeah. So what's do you remember what is NSS? I don't.
It's a naval standard score.
Okay. See, apparently I didn't meet it. Didn't even know what it was. So, all right. So you got voluntold the Harriers, but you didn't join us right away at 223. You got through the rag and you went down the street to the glorious Bumblebees.
I was a bumblebee. Two kind of bees, wannabes and bumblebees.
There you go, man.
Well, hey, wait, hold on a second. So 331, 542, and 231 all deployed, right?
Yep.
Correct.
Did you deploy?
I joined to the war.
Yeah.
I joined them right after they got back.
Okay. See, we
got there before the war at 223.
Yeah, and we've got to watch everybody leave. So okay, back up for a second, Spaz. Tell me when you started the rag. You remember when you started?
Yeah, I got winged in February of 91.
Okay.
And I think I moved up to Cherry Point in, I want to say April, May. And then there was a push on to get guys through. So I checked in and I started like a week later. There was no wait.
It was they shortened everything up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Savarese told us that don't make plans to go out to the beach and hang out on boats because you're going to be too busy studying.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so that's how. Okay, so you got to VMA 331 after everybody came back from the deployment.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you wound up there, and you had a couple of good adventures in 331, didn't you?
I did. Fitzgerald was my first CO, Magic, and then he was joined by Hollywood, and then Fitzy retired, and then Colonel Barr became the CO. Animal.
That's Hollywood. Oh, Animal.
Yeah, Animal. Okay. And then so I said my first adventure was the 100-knot overtake nozzle join up, and then when I got told that in the brief as a brand new guy, my very first flight out of 203. So I figured I better go talk to one of the experienced guys to figure out how they do this before I screw it up. And since I'd never done it before.
So in the pre-flight brief, the flight lead said, I want you to close on me with 100 knots and use your nozzles.
And use your nozzles to join to expedite the join up because this is the way we do it in the fleet. And I said, oh, okay. And so I didn't have any experience with that said technique. So I grabbed I grabbed the first guy I could find in the hallway of the squadron after I walked out of the brief, and it just happened to be our safety officer. And I asked him to give me the tech. I said, Slider, how do I do this 100-knot overtake nozzle join up? And he looked at me like I was from Mars. So he said, what are you talking about? And I told him what I was briefed, and I saw the color drain out of his face for the first of many times. And then and he told me not to do any of that and to do what I was taught at 203, and that he would go talk to the flight lead. So I guess that was
go wrong.
So I guess that was strike one, and strike two was I was doing a heavy bomb sortie at the North Guns with Chuckles, and this particular flight lead always had a bad habit of pulling the power back and climbing out at 250. I didn't know that. I didn't know that about this individual, but Carl did, and he told me, Spaz, if he does that, I want you to take a cutaway, and we're going to pass him like he's standing still, and you're going to join on me, and we're going to go to the target area, and I'm going to send him home. And that's exactly Now you're talking about a captain who's talking about a major. So that's exactly.
Was Chuckles the WTO?
He was, yeah, he was the WTI, and he was our assistant OPSO. He was the assistant OPSO and the pilot training officer all rolled into one.
So
man of many.
He was the captain. You're
man of many parts.
Yeah.
So the flight lead in question was the lead. So sure enough, Chuckles and I, we joined up, and he told that flight lead to go back to Cherry Point and land, and that he would talk to him after the flight. So I guess that was strike two. You know how you have these indicators that you tend to ignore when you're a first lieutenant, and it just goes right past you. So that was like strike two that I chose to ignore. And then, so we went to Norway on the USS Nausea, and
Nassau, love it,
on the Nassau, and that was also a good time because there was another that was not a fun deployment, and so I went to Pee Wee Herman and said, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" in his stateroom, and I knew Pee Wee because I'd coached both of his boys in baseball with Pee Wee. I taught them both how to pitch.
Oh, nice.
And so that's how Kevin and I kind of got to know each other on something other than the Marine Corps, on a different level. And so he said, "Come on in, Spaz. What's on your mind?" I said, "Hey, is this the way all deployments go?" And he goes, "What, are you not having any fun?" And I go, "No, this pretty much sucks." And he started laughing, and he said, "No, relax. This is a kind of a corner case. So don't base your whole career. Don't go out and commit suicide just yet." So I was like, "Okay, thanks." So that individual, that XO in question, he decided to hold stateroom inspections, which I didn't know at the time because I was brand new, having never deployed before, that wasn't part of the program.
It's not a thing. No.
Wow. Stateroom inspection.
So I was the assistant power line officer with Jimbo. And so Chuckles came to me and said, "Spaz, I need you to go down to your boys and get all the nasty smut magazines that you can round up. And we'll give them back."
All over Hollywood's room while he's gone.
So in their room, it was Chuckles, Jimbo, Tiny, and Benjo, where they were all roommates. And so they cleaned that room spick and span and put Hershey's Kisses on all the chocolates. But then they absolutely plastered every square inch of the walls in that room with smut. And then the light switch, they had the cutout of a male, and the light switch was the light switch was a certain part of his anatomy, if you can imagine.
Love it.
So when Hollywood walked in to do the stateroom inspection, I think the only comment he had was nice pictures, and then walked out.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, he downed a jet for not having a standby stopwatch, and I thought it was going to come off the top rail on him.
Wow.
Because I think to truth be told, I think honestly he was terrified to death of going off the bow.
Yeah. Clock's down, jet's down. Oh man.
Yeah, that's it. Can't go fly.
Wow.
So we had this back and forth with Tacron that carried over from. I found out that carried over from the war, because 331 was on the Nassau during Desert Storm.
Yeah.
And so we would Yogi.
Mm-hmm.
So Alex was the pilot, he was the schedule writer for 331.
Okay.
And we were participating in this exercise in Norway, and they had AWACS, and of course their call sign is Magic. So we couldn't use the call sign Magic on the ATO. So one of the approved call signs, if you can believe it or not, was Big Beaver.
Love it.
So we told Stokes, if we're not Big Beaver on that ATO tomorrow morning, you don't have a hair on your ass. So sure enough, when the ATO came out, we were Big Beaver. And that was not the call sign that Colonel Barr had selected. And so I think he got his ass chewed for about 30 minutes over that one.
Hey, it's the ATO comes down from above.
but Tacron and everybody in the exercise got a big kick out of us coming up on the radios and checking in with Tacron as Big Beaver up and ready with a flight of 2.
Big Beaver 1-5.
That's it.
Flight of 2 checking in as fragged.
So I don't know if you guys remember, we weren't having a lot of fun on the Nassau. So he got a copy of the ship's blank letterhead from the admin department, and he typed up from ship's XO to department heads, subject information update.
Oh,
And
beautiful.
apparently when VMA 331 embarked upon the Nassau during the war, the XO of the ship, who was a Navy captain, told Lieutenant Colonel Fitzgerald that his pilots could only enter the wardroom for meals if they were in the camouflage utility uniform. And Fitzgerald told the ship's XO what he could do with that. And so he said, if my guys walk into your wardroom naked, you're going to feed them, because some of these guys are going to go home in body bags, and I don't really care. We're fighting this thing called a war. You might have heard of it. Nice. So it was the same XO when we embarked aboard the Nassau with Animal in Hollywood. And so they kind of rolled over immediately on all the nonsense. And so anyways, we put this information update out, and it said point 1, it says, as predicted, the embarked Marines rolled over almost immediately on the flight suit issue. So now the only authorized uniform in the wardroom is the camouflage utility uniform. And then point 2, but on to more important issues, the USS Nassau has been sunk and regenerated at least a half a dozen times in this exercise, a true tribute to her true combat capability. The admin department's busy typing up yet another well-deserved battlee. But this should in no way impact your desire to wear sloppy casual Navy attire. So wrinkled khakis and soiled flight deck jerseys are still authorized and encouraged in the war room. Go Navy. So we signed that, and we put about 100 copies of it under about every stateroom door we could find.
Oh.
And then to make there's one thing about sucking the marrow out of life, but it's a whole different matter when you choke on the bone. We kind of choked on the bone, because then we picked the glass on the information glass in the wardroom, and we replaced the real plan of the day with that, and then we closed the glass. And then Animal, when we were all getting ready to go to the wardroom to eat lunch, Animal walked by that and read it in the loudest voice I think I've ever heard in my life. He said, "I want to see every bumblebee in the ready room right now."
Oh shit.
So we got our asses chewed. And then he said, "I'm going to find out who did this." And he pulled his pen out of his pocket of his flight suit. And he goes, "When I find out who did this, I'm going to hurt you. I'm going to hurt you with this." And Tiny was sitting right next to me. He goes, Tiny leans over and goes, "Spaz, is he going to poke me in the eye with that? Is that how he's going to hurt me?"
God,
So I told him to shut up.
Oh,
So, Jimbo can grow a mustache and a beard faster than the three of us put together. So
sure.
So we had to grow a
Yeah,
mustache.
he just squeezes hard, right? Like he's going to squeeze one out. And
that's all he had. And out. That's right. So he's one of these guys that probably shaves twice a day, and he still doesn't stay ahead of it. So he gave everybody a week head start, and he still won the shave a mustache contest. So he was my boss as the power line officer. So we were getting ready for a morning brief, and it was about 5 minutes before the brief, and I didn't see my boss. So being the good assistant boss, I ran into his stateroom and woke him up and said, "Jimbo, we're briefing here in about 5 minutes. So he literally threw his flight suit on, didn't put socks on, put his boots on, threw his flight suit on over the boots, and walked into the ready room. And of course, Hollywood saw that. And after the brief, he said, "Jimbo, you were not to walk forward in that flight suit." So he summarily moonwalked out of the ready room backwards.
I love it.
So we had a plaque. So because this was VMA 331 was told by Headquarters Marine Corps that we're being disestablished and shut down. So we had a plaque made because we knew this before the deployment to Norway.
Yep.
We had a plaque made for the USS Nassau, basically saying the Bumblebee's last cruise, and with the dates assigned with the deployment. And so none of us wanted to present that plaque to the Nassau because they had been so horrible to us. So Slider, who we affectionately referred to as the pseudo intellect, because apparently he was getting out of the Marine Corps and going to get his PhD in history to become a professor.
Oh, perfect.
So that's why we called him the pseudo intellect. And so Slider, he put together this scroll. We called it the scroll. So anyways, so Animal got his Achilles tendon crushed and playing a game of crud with the Royal Air Force at Wittering. So he had to be airlifted and medevac back to the States.
Damn it.
And so that left Hollywood in charge of the squadron, unfortunately. So we were up on the bow of the ship, and he was in the ready room and saw it up on the plat camera that all the officers and everybody was up on the fantail of the ship. And we said, hear ye, hear ye, hear ye, reposing absolutely no faith, trust, or confidence in said abilities of the USS Nassau. We hereby do not donate this plaque to said ship, but we cast it off into the sea, where we hope the USS Nassau joins it as part of the artificial reef program. And then we said, hurl the object. And since I played baseball, they let me chuck the plaque as far out into the North Atlantic as I could possibly sling it. And then all the listed Marines were cheering. And then, Hollywood came up to the flight deck and wanted to know what was going on. And we just, we kind of just politely ignored him as we walked past him to go back into the ship.
That's great.
So before we deployed to Norway, before VMA became VMA 331, it was VMSB 331. And so there was going to be a VMSB 331 reunion at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base out in Tucson. And so I was tasked, being the JO, with setting it up. We were going to take 6 jets out there as soon as we got back from Norway. So like 3 days after we got back from Norway, we were taking 6 airplanes out to Davis-Monthan for this reunion. And this is that story where the third time I almost got killed by this individual.
Great.
So the three divisions were going to be Slider, Spaz, and Hollywood, and then Chuckles, Tiny, and Duke Ellington. And Slider's jet went down with a hide leak. So this was back when, I don't know if you guys remember, but we had to have the airframes change part 331, dealing with the Kapton wire bundle.
Yeah.
So at the time, Paddles was the group CO, and we weren't allowed to take a non-part 331 jet out of the local flying area. So when Slider's jet went down with a hide problem, the maintenance couldn't fix it. So we wanted to know if we could take a non-part 331 out of the local area to Davis-Monthan for a reunion. So we went up to the group. Bottom line is they said no, but by the time we were going to do low levels into England Air Force Base in Alexandria, Louisiana, and then low levels into Randolph and spend the night. And then we're going to do another low level into El Paso, get gas, and another low level into Davis-Monthan, and the next day and be done with it. So bottom line is it became me and Hollywood because Slider couldn't go. And Slider said, "You got the lead, Spaz, have fun," with a sarcastic grin.
Was he whistling as he was walking back into the hangar?
Yeah, exactly. So we wound up flying just an instrument sortie down to England because we missed our start time on the low level. And then so I filed us for, 30 something thousand feet. And I got told, when I landed in England, "Why did you file us for so high?" And I thought, he said, "Why'd you file us for that altitude?" I thought maybe he was angry because I didn't file us high enough. I said, Did you want to go higher than that? And he goes, No, I want to go much lower than that. And I said, "Well, how low do you want to go?" And he said, "Like 4,000 feet. I was like, "What?" So we flew from England to Randolph at 4,000 feet and with no Victor charts, and right where all the bug smashers and VFR traffic are, with no TCAS, which was brilliant. So we get to Randolph, and it's so the next morning we wake up and it is lightning and thundering and it is pouring down rain. And I check out of the BOQ in the morning and Hollywood says, "You ready to go?" And I honestly, I sincerely thought he was joking. So I started laughing. And then I realized that he wasn't joking based on his reaction to my laughing at him. And he said, "You're in the fleet now, Spaz, and you got to suck it up and the mission, we got to make the mission." And I was thinking, yeah, but we're not on a mission. We're just going to a party. So
quit using logic now. Come on. That wasn't fair.
That's your first problem right there.
That's right. So at any rate, we walked over to when we filed the flight plan at base ops with the weather, they thought we were pulling their leg too, because they were like, "You're not serious about going flying in this, are you?" And of course we were. And so they were like stupefied. So by the time I walked out to my jet, I was soaking wet from head to toe. And then by the time I opened up the canopy and got my flight gear out, the entire cockpit was soaking wet. And then I was putting my gear on underneath the wing of the airplane. And people are literally stepping outside of base ops watching this fiasco happen. So bottom line is I pre-flight the jet, I get in the cockpit, I'm soaking wet from head to toe. And I fire up the APU, I get halfway through reading the clearance, and my amplifier on my oxygen mask shorts out because it's soaking wet.
Right.
Not supposed to be soaking wet. So we shut down, we go into flight equipment to see if they can fix it. Bottom line is Air Force equipment is not compatible with Navy equipment, so it can't be fixed. So we trash our plan and we refile from from Randolph to Yuma. And the plan is to get my mask fixed in Yuma and then go to Davis-Monthan.
Backtrack to Davis-Monthan from Yuma.
So I'm
only a few hundred miles.
So that's what we do.
So you're taking off intentionally Nordo.
Yes.
Well, you're only half Nordo, right? Because you just can't talk. You can hear, but you can't talk. Is that right?
Correct. That's correct. So, half a plane is better than a whole plane.
Well, sure. Why would you need to talk?
Yeah. So Hollywood forgot to bring his high charts, so he took mine. So now I have no charts, and I'm Nordo, and I'm writing down the fixes that he's putting on the flight release, and I'm looking up those fixes in the en route supplement and I'm writing down the lat longs as quickly as I can, so I can plug that into my inertial, so I know where the hell I'm going, since I have no charts because he took mine. So we do a section go, and his initial call when we check in with departure is, "Hey, my wingman's Nordo, and I sure hate to lose him in this. So can you expedite our climb to 230?" That was the initial call to ATC.
Brilliant.
So what most people do is, "Hey, my wingman's Nordo, I need to return to Randolph and land." But so anyway, the bottom line is the weekend we got to Davis-Monthan. We made the reunion, but when I got back to Cherry Point, I walked into work on Monday morning, and Slider, with that shit-eating grin, asked me, "How was your weekend?"
Have a good time, Lieutenant.
Yeah, and when I told him what had happened, he seriously dragged me into his office and he closed the door and he said, "I hope everything that you just told me that you're just pulling my leg." And I said, "Slider, I'm not. Everything I just told you is 100% absolute the truth. That is what happened." And with that, all the color drained out of his face again. And he said, "I want you to go to work." "I'd go to work, Spaz. I'll talk to you later. I have to go talk to the CO and the OPSO right now." And that was the end of that individual's flying with new guys.
How about that?
It only took been 3 attempts at killing somebody, right?
Yeah, only 3 attempts. So,
wow.
Well,
yeah.
I got a couple of questions, Pete, but I don't want to. Are you sitting on one? Because
go ahead.
Because I'm intrigued now, because I'm learning all this stuff about Spaz that I never knew. So, first of all, I'm trying to wrap my head around being told, "Okay, you're going to take up and we're going to take off and you're going to join up, but you can't talk to anybody." And by the way, I'm taking your charts.
Yeah, that was.
Let's think about that for a second. Oh, dear God. And now, just just had Spaz lost sight in the goo.
Oh, yeah.
How's he telling me he needs a vector? How's he? Yeah. Oh, my God.
So here's Spaz's game plan. So when we rolled out on the runway to do that section go, remember we had the mark feature on the Harrier?
Yeah.
So I hit mark and save that waypoint as mark 1, 2, and 3 in the inertial. So I said, if I lose sight of this clown, I'm squawking 7,600. I'm going right back to that mark point. And as soon as the TAC end locks up, I'm shooting the TAC end approach. I'm landing, and I'm going to call Cherry Point, and I'm going to tell them I will never fly with him again. Send me another flight lead and get me home. and I'm done.
Oh, well, that's a good plan. That was a good plan.
So that was my game plan.
That was a good.
But fortunately, we didn't need it because we were able to get through the weather and get on out to Davis-Monthan.
It sounds like he didn't pull power at 250 knots on the join up. No, you
No,
did a section go.
he did a section go, but we did climb out at 250, which was special. So I was like,
so
Yeah,
tell
you're
people what a
way
section
outside
go
the-
is. I don't think most people
you
know
don't
what a
need-
section go is.
yeah, because you don't need to worry about the air start envelope at 250
Right.
because you can't get a relight at
You
250.
can't get a relight. It makes
Yeah,
things
so-
simple that way.
So it makes
Spaz.
so you just pull the handle.
That's right.
That's
That's
right.
So yeah, describe what a section go is. Vice a delay,
A stream stow.
Yeah, stream stow.
So
this-
section go is just like we did in A4s, where we line up right next to each other, and lead adds power, and you just match the power, and you rotate together and clean up together.
So you did a conventional takeoff.
We did a conventional takeoff, just like we
Okay.
always did
Yeah.
when we were students in A4s, because
Hey.
he didn't want to do a stream stow because there was the risk that he would go up into the weather without me, and I would
Yeah.
immediately lose sight because I was Nordo.
Unbelievable.
and do a
Yeah.
circling visual approach and land and drop
Yeah.
time on him.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so you triggered a thought here. When you said the handle, pulling the handle, I understand you did pull the handle at one point.
I do. My logbooks no longer add up. Thanks.
Take
Chuck,
off
for-
and landings are separate.
Thanks for bringing that traumatic event back to my memory, Chuck.
Well,
Thanks.
Can you tell me about it? Because this happened. What you were a RAG instructor, right?
Yeah, Pete and I were instructors in the RAG, and I was. So the plan was to do low levels. It was me and my student was Lieutenant J.G. Luca Conti, who's one of our Italian students, who is, by the way, Admiral Conti now in the Italian Navy.
Nice.
How about that?
And it was Cruiser Howland and his student. So we were originally supposed to go to. I wasn't even supposed to fly that weekend. It was supposed to be another flight lead with Cruiser, but he came down with some kind of a upper respiratory infection, got sick.
COVID-19.
And,
Yeah, got the COVID before everybody knew it was COVID.
That's right. And so he came to me and said, "Hey, we're coming up on the end of the fiscal year. We're behind on PTR. I know you're single, so can you please take this flight and get these X's on these guys to finish them up?" So I said, sure. So we were supposed to go down to the Moody 2 MOA, but they were socked in with weather, and we didn't have the 3005 to do low levels. So we were authorized to fly lat on low levels at MAG 14. So we decided we were going to do lat on the VR 073, and we drop into Oceana, spend Friday night in Oceana, and Saturday morning we'd get up and do another couple lat X's and drop through Seymour Johnson to get gas, and then get these guys done, and we'd be done by Saturday at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
And LAD is
Great
low
plan.
altitude training. So it's
Low altitude tactical training. So the first the flights on Friday went fine, and then we dropped into Oceana. I'm sorry, we kept the jets. We couldn't get parking space at Oceana. We landed at Navy Norfolk, but we had BOQ space at Oceana. So it was a little bit of a, we were separated from the airplanes, but
It's logistical
yeah.
problem.
little logistical issue to solve, but the Navy hooked us up with some ground transportation, so it was no matter. So Saturday morning we filed to do the low levels, and according to the TR, we were supposed to be down at 200 feet. But I told Cruiser, I said, "Hey, I'm concerned with the low sun angle with the new guys and washing out the HUD. So why don't we do this first sortie, since it's first thing in the morning? We'll do it at 300 feet, and then when the sun angle comes up for the next flight after we get gas, we can drop it down to 200 feet, just so we kind of at least think about safety." And so Cruiser we're just doing no com tack turns in lat, and so Cruiser's student was having some difficulty winding up being sucked out of all the turns. So I asked Cruiser, "Are you ready to do because he was the lead. I said, "Are you ready to do a lead change?" I'm sorry, I was the lead and his student was getting the turns. And he said, "No, I need to see 2 more 90-degree turns in succession, and then I'll be able to take the lead." I said, "Okay." So I looked out to the left because I knew we were going to turn left. And I keyed the intercom and I said, "Hey, Luca, are you about ready to attack us left to a heading of, X?" And no sooner had I said that than somebody turned out the lights. And what I learned was we had hit, and we had just come out of a turn. So as you know, the T-Birds only have 2 pylons versus 6.
Right.
So they're aerodynamically a lot cleaner, and so they accelerate. And we had a 408 powered T-Bird, so it had a lot of power. So we came out of the turn fast at 487, 490, something like that, which was what. So we did lat at 450 indicated because the students were having a difficult time reading ground speed in the HUD. So we just said, you know what, just use indicated airspeed. It's easy to see, and that's what we did. And so we hit the bird. And I couldn't see because the bird, apparently what happened was the bird came through the bullet screen. It went right over Luca's right shoulder and it collapsed that little flimsy plexiglass that separates the two cockpits.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump in here real briefly, just because to give anybody listening an understanding. In a T-Aviate Harrier, the student actually sits probably 2.5 to 3 feet below the second seat, the hind seat.
Correct.
And so the actual bubble canopy over the student's head or the front seater's head, regardless of student or instructor, is the windscreen, the primary windscreen for the back seat.
Correct.
So that's how you wound up taking a bird right in the snoot.
Right in the beak. Exactly. Yeah. And so I couldn't communicate because as you know, I sit right in front of the motor. So I couldn't hear anything because of the roar of the motor and the wind blast. And I couldn't see.
Oh, is 450 knots of wind loud?
Yes.
So it came through the canopy in front of you and it blasted through your
my.
Yeah.
Shit. So the second
out.
So the little divider between the two cockpits is just to make sure that if the front seater pulls the handle, the rockets don't burn the guy in the back seat.
Right.
So it doesn't offer any impact resistance. So that whatever came through the canopy, it collapsed that divider and hit me in the face.
Wow.
And I couldn't see. And I couldn't talk. I couldn't see. And then I felt the jet roll off to the left. So I'm thinking I'm at 300 feet off the ground. I'm ballistic. I can't talk. I can't see. And I don't know whether my student is alive, dead, conscious, unconscious. I don't know if he's flying the jet or if the jet's flying him. But all I know is I'm in a negative flight path angle going towards the earth at 490 knots and I can't see to fly. So at that point I decided it was time.
Bad. That's bad.
Yeah. So I decided at that point I was going to give it back to the taxpayers, and which I did. And then the real fun of the story starts after I get on the ground, because we landed, and Pete knows this because Pete lived through this as the safety officer.
I was the safety officer in the squadron.
Yeah. So I ejected over a little town of Windsor, North Carolina, which is in Bertie County, which is up around the Albemarle Sound, which is a big agriculture community. And I landed on the outskirts of this community down a dirt road with a family's house. And I landed my student landed in this family's front yard. And this was Saturday morning at 9:30 in the morning. And I landed in the family's backyard. And the ejection ripped my helmet off and it ripped my oxygen mask off. And all I had hanging out of my regulator was the hose. And I didn't exactly look like the picture of health. So I had bird guts and my blood, and I was cut and bleeding. And some of the blood was mine and some of the blood was the birds. And so when I got out of my parachute in the backyard, I reached for my Prick 90 and it had been torn out of my vest. So I didn't have one, but fortunately my student was in the front yard and I grabbed his, and I immediately came up on 2828 and told Cruiser, hey, we're okay. We got some minor injuries, but we're both okay. Don't run yourself out of gas.
The bird didn't make it.
But the bird didn't make it. So the ambulance came and took us to the hospital, and we're not in this little county hospital with this this country doc and this emergency room nurse taking care of us. We're not in there 5 minutes, and the press comes in with cameras rolling.
No.
And so I'm trying to kick the door shut to the emergency room, and the doc sees that, and he closes the door and he goes, "I guess you don't want them in here, do you?" So he goes out and he goes out into the emergency room and he goes, shut your cameras off and get the hell out of here. And this is what I hear through the closed swinging doors, the OR. He goes, I hear freedom of the press. And I hear this old country doc go, I don't give a good blankety blank about your blankety blank freedoms. You're on private property. I'm trying to stabilize 2 injured aviators and I don't need your shit right now. So he said,
for him.
So he said, you can turn the cameras off and leave now, or I can call the sheriff and have you go out of here in handcuffs. It's your choice. So he came back in and said, how was that? And I said, that was perfect. And so I don't know if you remember, Chuck, but in Eastern North Carolina, there was that Shavender Trucking. They were those light colored purple trucks that did all the log hauling for Weyerhaeuser.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, so the nurse who took care of me was a lady named Faye Shavender. And that Shavender Trucking is her brother.
I'll be darned.
So she stitched me up and I said, well, so, I'm thinking my whole career is over. I'm going to Leavenworth. I'm spending the rest of my life behind bars and that's it. I'm done. And so you have all these weird thoughts when that kind of shit happens. And
sure.
So I asked Faye, I said, so how do I look? And she goes, oh, honey, in her deep, Eastern North Carolina Southern accent, she goes, oh, honey, I've seen much worse in car accidents. She goes, would you like to see a picture? You like to see what you look like? And I said, well, yes, ma'am, if it's okay. And she goes, oh, sure. She got a mirror and she goes, see, you look just fine. There's nothing wrong. And
she's shaking the mirror around us.
So the mirror never stopped moving. And so I got airlifted back to Cherry Point on Pedro on the search and rescue helicopter with no hearing protection, mind you. And then I go into a full blown flight physical with the doc and doing a hearing test on me when I've been in the back of a helicopter for a couple with riding back to Cherry Point with no hearing protection, with that transmission whining in my ears.
Sure.
So Cruiser, the only smart thing I probably did was I kept this. So Cruiser lived diagonally across the street from me in our neighborhood in New Bern. So I kept a spare set of keys to my car and my house at Cruiser's house in case of just such an emergency. Because my keys were in my flight suit pocket, and now they're somewhere in Eastern North Carolina out in the swamp. Oh, so one
did that
funny
pocket get ripped right off too?
Well, no, but I kept the fuel card and I gave it back to Thummer, the squadron CO, Colonel Thumb, when I got there with the receipt for the gas.
Nice.
So
didn't lose that.
but one funny anecdote. So when I came around the front of the house, some hunter, because this was January of '95. So deer season is in effect. So hunters come out of the woods with their 30-06s and they've got the parachute and the ejection seat. And they said, hey, you want this? And I swear to God, I thought I could hear Deliverance playing in the background. And I thought very quickly I was going to become Ned Beatty. And so I said, yeah, I got this rich uncle named Sam and he's going to need that for the investigation. And then they both pointed with their rifles over in this. So this house backed up to this cypress swamp area.
Yeah.
And they said it's a good thing you didn't land over there. And I said, really, why is that? And they go, snakes. So I'm like, great. I survived a 500 knot ejection. I'm going to get bit by a water moccasin or a rattlesnake and die.
Fig, no kidding. I'm telling you, I walked that accident site and we were hip deep in water and sludge and mud and all that. It was one of the more difficult accident sites to ever access. They were lucky to land on land because most of that airplane was in the swamp.
I've got a couple questions. I know you couldn't see, and that led you to say, okay, I got to get out of this thing. What attitude were you actually in when you ejected?
So
based on that?
I would guesstimate because we were not quite wings level because I was thinking we were getting ready to go into a left-hand turn.
Yes.
And so we were 300 feet AGL. Last airspeed I saw on the HUD was 487 indicated. And so I would guesstimate we were probably in maybe a 5 or 7 degree left wing down angle of bank when I pulled the handle.
Okay.
And
your student.
So I learned what happened after talking to the student. What he had done that I didn't know because I couldn't see or communicate with him. He had leaned down into the left because the the bird entered the bullet screen in the right-hand corner. So he
was ducking.
He ducked down into the left to get out of the wind blast. But when he moved down into the left with his body, where did he take the stick?
Down and left.
Down and left. So what did the airplane do? It responded.
Down and left. Yeah.
And I didn't know that because
that's what you felt.
That's what I felt. Seat of the pants. I felt. I knew we were in a left descending turn because I felt the jet roll to the left and start descending in my seat of the pants. So I couldn't talk. I couldn't see. And I didn't know whether he was doing that intentionally or whether he was unconscious. And I didn't have a lot of time to debate the issue. So I had to get out. So I got out. Was it a surprise to him that you punched both of you guys out? So when we got on the ground, I explained to him why I pulled the handle, and he understood. But I mean, both of us it was a bad day.
My recollection, I'm glad to hear that he's an admiral now. My recollection was he never flew again. His hand get really goobered in the. Because he was out of body position when I pulled the handle, he broke his right arm in the ejection. Yeah. And so he went back to Italy and recuperated and had to get his arm rehabbed when they pulled the cast off. And then he came back to 203 and finished the syllabus. Okay. And he did his tour at 542 for the year. And then he went back to Italy to take his place in their fleet squadron. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, because I was in the first Civ Div, the first civilian division by the time he got back then. So right. Well, that's good. I'm glad he went on to a successful career. My last recollection was he had never flown. Yeah, so he's an admiral in the Italian Navy. So God bless him. Time to go to Italy. Look him up. That's right. That's right. So I actually did look one of those guys up. Do you guys remember Doogie? Yeah. So Doogie was his call sign because he looked exactly like Neil Patrick Harris. But yeah, Stefano Battaglia. He was in Alitalia, and I guess he's now at ITA. I think is the name of the airline that became Alitalia became. And I remember we had who was the lieutenant commander who had the desk in ops, and then Chuckles. Calderon. Yeah. Remember him? Chuckles was the OPSO, and let's just say after this guy flew, you perspire a lot, I guess, when you pull G's, obviously, and I wouldn't know about that, but apparently after he finished flying, he had all the sweat out of him. Yeah, he had a very distinct odor to his person, and that would clear the entire ops shop out. Well, I'll be darned. So that's awesome. Oh man. So great story, Spaz. This is good stuff. I told Repeat that that ejection is not the closest I've come to dying in an airplane, believe it or not. No. Really? All right. So the closest I've come to dying in a jet airplane was at World Airways at my previous carrier. You'll have to edit that out. Don't worry about it. Just leave it there. Yeah. I'm not worried about World. They're defunct. It was World Airways. They tried to kill him. Yeah. So how'd that work? Let's hear it. So I was going into Entebbe in Uganda on the east coast of Lake Victoria, and Entebbe's at about 4,400 feet elevation. And I was flying. Rich Dagnew was the captain was a very experienced captain, a lot of time in the 11, and he was a KC-10 driver in the Air Force. And then the first officer who was doing the flying, I was the RFO. He was a DC-10 flight engineer, and he was a DC-10 flight engineer check airman for the carrier. And then he got enough multi-engine time on his own where he got his commercial pilot's license. And so the airline hired him as a first officer. Wow. And they gave him the choice of the MD-11 or the 747-400. And he chose the MD-11 for his familiarity with the systems. But I thought that was a bad decision because that's a bridge too far to go from recips to an MD-11. Yeah. Yeah. So he had a bad habit of, I call it the chin yoke interconnect. When he would look up and go visual, he would pull up on the yoke. And when he would look down to the flight director, he would push down. Oh boy. So we were two red over two white on the Pappies going into Entebbe, and he looked up and he pulled up, and we went from 2 over 2 to 4 white. And then what did he do to fix that situation is he pushed. Oh boy. And we hit the ground at 1,800 feet a minute.
How high were you when this transpired? Well, you must have been pretty low.
So he was coming in through about 500 feet on the approach, and we went high, and he was blowing the ball off the top, but by going to 4, and then he pushed on the yoke to fix the high, but he never flared, and so we hit the ground going what I estimated to be about 1,800 feet a minute. And when the plane bounced, it twisted about 40 degrees to the left. And I was thinking to myself, there is absolutely no way we are going to land this machine out of this. I mean, there's no salvaging this. And so I screamed as loud as I could, power, 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 in my loudest LSO voice I could muster. And then he slammed the throttles through the breaker bar on the MD-11 and over-temped the number 2 engine on the go around. And then going through about 290 knots, I'm screaming airspeed, airspeed, airspeed. And he said, I'm pushing for knots. And I said, no, you're about to rip the slats off the machine, buddy. We're flying. So if you pull the power back, we'll keep from tearing the machine apart. So we came back around and landed. And so I had a mechanic next to me, and I had a female ops rep loadmaster, and she was as white as a sheet of printer paper. We scared her. We scared her pretty good. And then the mechanic is beyond angry because he's got a hard landing inspection, an over temp inspection, an over speed inspection, and who knows what else.
He's going to be busy for days.
For days, yeah. So he is beyond angry. So yeah, that was a pretty colorful flight.
Well, it was almost the MD-11 for you, a varsity airplane. Kind of like the Harrier. That was a varsity airplane too, as I recall.
Yeah, kind of like the Harrier. So yeah.
McDonnell Douglas, building for varsity pilots. There you go.
That's right. So
hey, I got to tell you guys something real quick. In the very beginning, you were talking about, your very first sortie at the RAG, or a very first sortie in your gun squadron, and the flight lead briefed, hey, you need to be at 100 knots overtake. So we would sometimes, especially when you were experienced, use a lot of overtake and use the nozzles to join, right? So I go back to Kingsville to be an instructor, and I'm doing a formation flight. I got a Marine F-18 guy in my back seat. He's my instructor, and we're doing a join up. It's sunset, and I got 100+ knots of closure. But in my mind, I can kill it, no problem. I just reach over here and grab the nozzle lever. He saw this coming because he'd flown with Harrier guys before, coming back to be instructors. He didn't say a word. And, when I got real close, I let go of the throttle and reached for the nozzle lever, and it wasn't there. And about that time, it hit me. It's like, oh, shit. Underrun. I got the lead. Of course, everybody got a big, but I mean, it was 100 knots.
Oh, yeah.
But, that's just what you got comfortable with after. But telling a new guy, hey, you're going to join at 100 knots overtake. That's a message for disaster.
Yeah. What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong with that?
Exactly. Well, with that, I'll tell you what, we've been going close to an hour now. So we're Spaz, I hope you'll come back and join us again soon.
Absolutely.
Please do.
I got some more Kingsville stories to tell you that I think I shared with you earlier, Repeat.
Yeah. Some good stuff.
We can talk about that at another time.
Well, and I love training command stories. So let's do another episode.
Okay, absolutely. We'll do that.
Please
make it so. So in the meantime, everybody, if you have any questions or comments, we're loving those. Reach out to Fig at sothereiwas.us or Repeat at sothereiwas.us. Repeat spelled REPETE. You can follow us on Facebook at sothereiwas.us/Facebook or Twitter, sothereiwas.us/Twitter. All right.
So you remember when Levi Strauss had the 501 jeans, and they had all the different 501 commercials. So I thought about contacting Levi Strauss, because I had a pair of Levi's that's actually survived the ejection in my helmet bag underneath the seat that I actually found. And I was going to actually tell them, hey, these have been flight tested to 500 knots. So here's your 501 jeans. They actually work.
Beautiful. There you go. Good to 501.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, with that, everybody, we hope you are enjoying these shows. Give us your feedback, please. If you're an aviation professional in some way, reach out to us and we'll see if we can get you on the show. In the meantime, stay safe and check 6.
I'll be back.